All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We are here on Truthstream with Leo Zagami. We are going to play his intro right now. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let me go ahead and there we are. We are live with the amazing Leo Zagami. This is our third show together, and he has a new book out. It's the 10th book, and we're going to go into more of the details on that. But first of all, Leo, welcome back to the show.
It's so good to see you again.
Thank you for having me on. It's actually, if we calculate also Pope Francis, Last Pope, and Invisible Master, probably my 12th book or 13th. I lost count of how many books I've been doing, but I wanted to present this book to your audience because I think it's very relevant to the time, very relevant to the times we're living right now. It is about a subject which it's all over the news today, like the Middle East, and it's a subject which is often misunderstood, and there's very little clarity. And so I think that this conversation might help a lot of people finally get the right conclusions, because it's another word that we only hear from the mainstream media, and as we know, the mainstream media are always lying to us. So I think that to have a bit of clarity in that, it will be really helpful for a lot of people.
Well, that sounds like an excellent place to start. Shall we start with the Middle East, or?
The Middle East is the birth place of all the secret societies as we know them today, because, of course, we are, as a Western civilization, in debt with the Middle East, from ancient Mesopotamia to Egypt and to ancient Greece and so on. These are basically the foundations of our society as we know it. And also secret societies have been developing since the Middle Ages as we know them today, because they were inspired from the Middle East. This is something that very few people know about. The subject of Islamic Freemasonry, of secret societies in the Middle East, is very rarely discussed. And there is also a lot of a misunderstanding or false presumptions, like, for example, thinking that Sufism is all all great and all love, and it's all about the poetry of Jalaluddin Rumi and the romantic tales about the people who had this knowledge that in some way they wanted to preserve. It's true that these secret societies wanted to preserve something, but at times not for the reasons that we know. Actually, in most cases, just like in the Western world, secret societies were established because they had to hide certain information from either the authorities, the clerical authorities, the religious authorities, or either from the public. So the origins of secret societies brings us directly to the Middle East, and for the first time I discuss this subject in relation to Islam.
Excellent. This is exciting. You know, I am a big fan of Rumi, but I never made that association with the Sufis. So
no, well, that is one of the things, the great misunderstandings that we have. There is a dark side of Sufism that very few people know about. Not many people have a direct experience with the Sufi world, and at the same time, very few people know that Freemasonry here in the West has manipulated the Middle East, often using Sufism, or even other countries that are even more far east, like Pakistan and India and other countries that had these secret societies established for a very long time, mainly to preserve their own knowledge, but then the way they operated resulted familiar, let's say, to the Western Freemasons, who as soon as they colonized those countries, in most cases Great Britain, the United Kingdom, or France, felt the necessity to establish a connection. But this connection was originally established in the Middle Ages with the Crusades. And of course, the Crusades were the result of a completely new interpretation, even for Christians, of the Bible, because for the first time they were going for a holy war. And the concept of holy war was not really known here in the Western world until they actually discovered it in the Middle East with the secret societies and also the various Islamic schools that were embracing this holy war, this jihad, that was not only internal but was also external, and was something that very few people know about, the fact that we ourselves here in the Western world actually took the inspiration for the Crusades from the Middle East. It might also make the people in the Middle East finally realize that we are not the only people responsible for all their problems. There is something else going on. The way that Islam expanded so fast meant that many other cultures that had thousands of years of tradition were immediately absorbed in it, but they didn't capitulate altogether. Often they went underground. And that's when, for example, you start seeing the merger of previous religions with Islam and the creations of new forms of Islam, because there wasn't really a centralized way of controlling this religion like in the Roman Empire. Once they accepted Christianity, it became the religion of the empire, and it was a centralized authority of Rome that more or less through a series of councils established how Christianity was supposed to be, though maybe the Oriental churches tended to think otherwise, and then they ended up in fact breaking up and forming the Orthodox world. We can say that Christianity wasn't so prone to schism, like instead in the case of Islam. Islam was from the very beginning prone to various schisms. Also, Sufism, and you talked about Jalaluddin Rumi, and of course this touches me personally because my son is called Isaac Rumi, and this book is dedicated to him. But I never saw him, I never spoke to him since 2008 because of the loving Sufis. So just to make a direct example, and he is in the hands, and this is an incredible revelation I make in this book, of his stepfather is a member of the World Economic Forum of Klaus Schwab, and he is being brought up in that context. So he would probably never look to contact me, because we are, of course, in two totally opposite worlds. And I've been fighting, as you know, the New World Order forever without any compromise. I paid the consequences. And one of the things that unfortunately happened was that in 2008, I was accused of espionage, thanks to the direct intervention of these people that in my book I explain. They are a very powerful Islamic movement called the Gulen movement, whose leader actually lives here in America, protected by the Clinton Foundation, called Fethullah Gulen. And he lives in Pennsylvania, surrounded by 50 bodyguards. So, I mean, this is what happens, unfortunately, when in America you have the Democrats in bed with the Muslims and in bed with the Jesuits, because the relationship that goes back to the Knights Templar and their original association to Islam was then later on carried by their heirs, the Jesuits. The Jesuits, as you probably know, became the intelligence service of the Vatican, the military side of the Vatican. In fact, they have a general as their head. That gives you an idea. However, they actually embrace the Jesuit order after a lot of controversy surrounding Ignazio Loyola, because during the Reformation they needed a group that could infiltrate these new rebels within the Christian world that were starting to go each their own way. So that is what happened back then. But today, the Jesuits are with Pope Francis and with his collaborators at the center of a project which started in early 2019 called Human Fraternity, which was signed originally in Dubai, that is meant to establish a one world religion. So they are using Sufism these days to promote the lie of moderate Islam. I have to say, because I mean, in the past I was involved with the Muslim world directly, that there is also, of course, great people in the Sufi world who are honestly engaged on a path of love. However, most, if not all, the organizations as such, just like in the Christian world, Christian denominations have each one created their own organization, their own church, their own outlet that becomes inevitably corrupt. And so I tend to judge people not by the way they belong to this or this other religion, but the way they actually feel in their heart towards God, which is, I think, a much more honest assumption. Now, using Sufism to promote the lie of moderate Islam is something that has happened even in countries like Pakistan. And to be honest, Pakistan is not really a country with a lot of tolerance. And when the immigrants come over here, there is all the big problems that come with it, including arranged marriages to much younger, even children and so on, that are really incompatible with our society. So Sufism at the moment plays the martyr card in the rise of Salafism. This is something I explain in my book. And what does it mean? Salafism is something that emanated in two directions. One, in the Wahhabi direction, created the religion which is at the base of all those oil-rich countries in the Emirates and the House of Saud, the Saudis. On the other side, the Salafi jihadists are the ones that from the Muslim Brotherhood onwards created an Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Hamas, and every single Islamic militant group that it's embracing a different view of Islam that wasn't embraced in the past. You see, where does this form of extreme jihadism come from? And my book goes back 1,000 years to make you understand where it comes from. It comes from the order of the Assassins, of assassins, that also, of course, took their name from the Ashish. They were a Nizari Shiite order. The Shiites were the first ones to establish secret societies, because when they started to expand a different form of Islam, they were, of course, fought by the Sunni Muslims that were the original Orthodox who believed in Abu Bakr as the successor to Muhammad, while instead with the Shiites, there was suddenly, after the fourth caliph, that was the cousin of the Prophet Muhammad, called Ali, the husband of the daughter Fatima, the establishment of a new lineage of chosen people that in the Shia world established what is known as the 12 Shia Imams, and all this created, of course, a lot of inner fights between Muslims. But from the very start, from the moment actually Muhammad died, soon after, his companions and family started to argue, and it ended up with a battle called the Battle of the Camel. So in my book, I explain how the Shiites were the first ones to adopt Sufism because they were generally persecuted, and this form of secret society could protect them from the Sunni world. However, later on, the Sunni will embrace themselves Sufism, and they will make it acceptable within the Sunni world, and then there will be also a merger of Shiite and Sunni tariqas at times, and in any case, Sufism is part of the secret societies of Islam, but it's not the only secret societies within Islam, but they are all part of the Middle Eastern Illuminati. The Illuminati themselves here in the West, people like Aleister Crowley, were profoundly inspired by Sufis like Mansur al-Alaj, who Saladin's son basically cut his head off, and he cut his head off because this guy was an heretic, and he was an heretic saying things that were closer actually to the way the Illuminati of today see things, like almost saying, I am the truth, I am all the truth is wrapped around my turban, and basically I'm God. And that we know is the erroneous path of the Western Illuminati. And the Western Illuminati, who are the Western Illuminati? We commonly refer to the Illuminati as the one established by Adam Weishaupt. And Adam Weishaupt himself was also very inspired by the Middle East and by the Zoroastrian religion in particular. Now, the Zoroastrians, the Manichaeans, the Gnostics, they were still surviving at the times of the Muslims, and they became part of that, of those secret mystery schools that adopted Islam somehow to cover up their own more secret beliefs. And all this triggered the birth in Cairo of a lodge, a very powerful lodge that from the moment the Fatimid dynasty, which was a Shiite dynasty that established itself in Cairo, they actually gave the name to the city, Al-Qaira, and then it became Cairo. This city is, of course, a city with a very old tradition and background, because you have, of course, you have Giza, you have Alexandria, you have Memphis, you have all the cities of ancient Egypt. So when the Muslims arrived in ancient Egypt, it wasn't the Sunni initially, it was actually the Shiites. And they were kind of more embracing of all the past culture. And they formed a lodge which was known as the Lodge of Reason. And this is very closer to the modern Illuminati. In the lodge, they adopted only the means of science, while instead outwards, they will use religion as an oppressive method to control the masses, especially with the Sharia being part of the Quran teachings. You see, the Quran is not really only a religious book, it's also a book of legal, of all kinds of teaching that you have to adopt in your daily life, basically laws that you have to follow. So you live following the Islamic law, you live in a certain way. That is the problem today in the Western world. They come here at times presenting themselves as moderate Muslims, but either they're moderate or either they are Salafi jihadists and terrorists. They all eventually want to establish the Sharia, which is incompatible with Western life in any way, shape, or form. That's why we have so many problems today in countries that suddenly, like Sweden or London, which after the Second World War brought from its very wide range of colonies in the British Empire, the Commonwealth, there was all these Muslim countries that suddenly could be used for workers because England needed workers after the Second World War. This was a country that was severely damaged by the Second World War, by Adolf Hitler. And so they wanted to build up this country again, make it stronger again. They never really managed to keep the empire. As we know, the empire fall apart, and India and all the other parts, and Pakistan was formed, and everything kind of it was impossible to maintain that kind of status they had once upon a time. But having said that, the Muslims came, and they came, millions of them came to England, and they stayed in England, and they formed very important communities that at that point Freemasonry tried to integrate with their lodges. Now, Freemasonry from 1813 onwards had embraced had opened to the possibility of embracing all forms of religion within a lodge. So they knew that the empire was made of many different religions. From the establishment of modern speculative Freemasonry in 1717 to 1813, it was mainly a Christian thing, and it was meant to bring back the Christians who had fought against each other. In 1813, they brought in the Muslims, the Jews, and many others, the Sikh, the Hindus, as long as they had a holy book of reference they could place as volume of the sacred law in the lodge. What does that mean? It means that, of course, when there was incompatibility, there was fightings within ghettos between Muslims, Christians, or the communities of the various religions were fighting against, Freemasonry will intervene because their leaders will all be in the same lodge, and it will be used as a way of controlling, also and balancing the situation. However, Freemasonry was also, in reverse, it was also brought to the Middle East by both the French and the English, so they could gradually mine the Ottoman Empire. Once the Ottoman Empire cracked, ended, that was the beginning of what we have today in the Middle East. The establishment of new countries, like, for example, Jordan or many other countries that simply were created out of thin air, out of the division that was operated by Great Britain and France. In 1916, they met secretly, the Sykes-Picot Agreement. And in 1918, eventually there was the Balfour Declaration sent to Lord Rothschild that will open the possibility also of encouraging more Jews to go back to the Holy Land. Now, today we have a situation which is highly chaotic in the Middle East, because we have to go in the past and see where all this chaos is born from. Now, for example, when it comes to the Salafi jihadists, which I talked earlier, they were a creation of Islamic Freemasonry, fostered by British and French Freemasonry. Jamaluddin al-Afghani, considered the father of modern Islam, he was initiated into one of the most important lodges in Egypt, and he was controlled by two British intelligence operatives. And he went on to establish also a much larger group of lodges under him. And once he started to operate with more politics and religion in his lodges, he was simply told to operate under a different charter, under the Grand Orient of France, that gave that possibility, even if he was still working for England. The thing is here, England and France have a great responsibility in today's mess in the Middle East. Jamaluddin al-Afghani went on to become the inspirator of people that later on will found the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood became the basis for all this hate towards the Jews, especially from 1920. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood was founded in 1928, but 3 years prior to that, a Maronite priest, I think a Lebanese Maronite priest, published the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And I dedicate my last chapter of this book on the Protocols of the Elders of Zion are a very controversial subject, as you know. It blames everything on a hypothetical Zionist plot to take over the world. And in reality, the new interpretation that I give to people about the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, it's not a new interpretation based out of thin air, but on facts. The people involved in the creation of this document were Sabbatean Frankists. Sabbateans are this Jewish schismatic heresy that was also very much involved in Freemasonry. These forms of Freemasonry that were established within the Sabbatean movement became prevalent in the Middle East, especially in the Ottoman Empire, so they could mine gradually the Ottoman Empire, because the Ottoman Empire lasted 800 years. And it kind of brought us to a relative stability in the Middle East. A relative stability means that, yes, if you were Christian or Jew, you might not have had the possibility to reach the heights of the society, or maybe you could, but you will always have some limitations. The important thing was, though, that you paid an extra tax. Now, that is from the very beginning of the Islamic expansion, even much 5 cent. I mean, I'm talking from the 7th century onwards when it was established. One of the ways that forced people into conversion wasn't necessarily cutting their throat. It happened with the pagans. If you were not in the Holy Book as a Christian or a Jew, you were a pagan. And if you were a pagan, at that point, you had to convert. It was obligatory. But if you were a Christian or a Jew, because you were nominated in the Quran, you were tolerated as long as you paid an extra tax. Now, a lot of people, of course, having to pay an extra tax, they will eventually capitulate and say, okay, I'm going to bow down 5 times to make a day. Who cares? I pay an extra tax with this that is making me broke. So, I mean, it became also an interest, a money thing. However, there was also other groups like the Sabaeans that emerged out of thin air when the Muslims arrived in the city of Iran, and they asked, what religion are you? And the guy said, city of Iran was an ancient city of Illuminati. They had a lot of knowledge predating Islam. They said, okay, give us a few months, talk with our lawyer. And the lawyer went into the Quran and went around, and in the end, they found this name, the Sabaeans. Nobody knew who they were. And when they came back and said, which religion are you? They said, the Sabaeans, because that was what they found in the book, and they believed them. And when they said, who is your God? There was Hermete Trismegistus. That was a way of preserving ancient knowledge, because Hermete Trismegistus is the basis of Hermetica. So we are today in a Middle East that we see very barbaric, but it was never only a barbaric place. It was actually a place of great culture that preserved also culture in certain important centers, universities that changed forever also the way we operate today, because this culture will eventually make its way back into Europe from the Moorish Spain and then build up the Renaissance. However, that culture was not, of course, originated with Islam. It was simply incorporated after they expanded, they looted, they invaded, and they got this knowledge, and at times they reformulated. And so today we are at the end, today, I mean, the 19th of June, while I'm talking to you, we are at the end of the Hajj, of the Holy Pilgrimage. What does it mean? It means that we are viewing millions of Muslims that at least once in their life have to go to these places, in particular Mecca, where you have this Kaaba, this monolith. It's a little bit, think about it. Stanley
Big black
Kubrick
cube.
had this monolith at the beginning of 2001 Space Odyssey. And this monolith is the moment in which suddenly we have an evolution that breaks from our monkey past, if I want to describe it like this, on non-Homo sapiens, let's say, from a Neanderthal or what was prior to that past. And suddenly we evolve in something different because this monolith, it's in front of these monkeys, that suddenly then one of them kills the other and gives birth to the use of force. But also, if you think about it, when he's launching, he has this bone, you remember, and he killed with the bone, and then that bone is launched in the air, and then and it becomes a space thing object. So Kubrick shows us this monolith. Now, the importance of this monolith is very important, this bit, because today we see at the end of the Hajj the people going around this monolith, which is said to be a meteorite, possibly coming from could be Saturn, could be Sirius. Now, we know that Arthur C. Clarke, in the original version, it was actually Saturn. It wasn't Jupiter, as later on it was showed in the movie. Saturn has a lot of occult elements to it. And so does the Kaaba. The fact that they go around and create this egregoric energy, this thought form, through the prayer, the stoning of the devil, which is also part of this ritual, annual ritual. Well, I mean, when Muhammad came along in the 7th century, Mecca was a city with 360 idols. 360 idols, okay? And so it wasn't easy for him to establish monotheism, especially because the tribe of rich merchants that was in the city said once he launched his Quran after chanting it for a number of years, decades, they actually kicked him out of Mecca. They kicked him out of Mecca because they said, we have 360 idols. You're going to send us out of business here with your monolithic, monotheistic religion. So what we're going to do here, we're going to kick you out of town. And he went to Medina. That's why Medina today is the second most important place. Somebody is asking in the chat, where do Khazarian come in all this? Well, Khazarian come in all this because they didn't want to convert either to Islam, either to Christianity. They saw these two religions as not fitting with their identity. And so they embraced Judaism. However, there is a lot of misconceptions with the Khazarians because there is no Khazarian DNA. They are not the ancestors of the Ashkenazis. There is actually a book which I think I have somewhere here. If I find it, I might show it to you. I'm not sure it's easy to find, but yeah, I have it. If you wait a second, there is a
Didn't they come from?
Interested, at least.
Didn't they originally come from Turkey and Ukraine?
Okay, basically the book that I was about to show you is modern DNA research on this subject.
Okay.
Okay, and this modern DNA research finally explains in a scientific way what happened to the Khazarians. The Khazarians simply adopted Judaism but they were not Jewish. So
Right.
they did it as a matter of convenience because they didn't want to embrace Islam. They didn't think Islam was the solution, and actually it might have been the beginning of a lot of problems. And we will have probably seen a part of the areas occupied by the Khazarians in the Caucasus region nowadays Muslim more than later on with the expansion of the Ottoman Empire. But in any case, the Khazarians are not Jewish, and there will never be any Khazarian DNA you can find. And that is a big problem for those people who have all these anti-Semitic claims, because there was a conspiracy, series of conspiracy theories that went around for the last 100 years that built up around the Khazarians this idea that they were the ones that took over Judaism. No, guys, the Khazarians didn't do anything. It was the Sabbatean Frankists within Judaism who both built this conspiracy theory as a way of sending people in search of something else, which is very convenient. But the Sabbatean Frankists, they are Jews. And Sabbatai Zevi was himself somebody, though, who had basically millions of followers at one point after he declared to be the Messiah. He was inspired also in becoming the Messiah by his John the Baptist figure, which I explain in this book. Is called Nathan of Gaza, from the city of Gaza.
Okay.
And he was the one who basically, Nathan of Gaza, when he saw that they kicked out the whole Sabbatean movement out of Jerusalem, stated that Gaza was the holy city of the Sabbateans, and made a massive ritual, which was a massive ritual orgy to embrace. Nathan of Gaza wanted to embrace Sabbatai Zevi as the Messiah. He had dreamed about it. He had fostered the idea that he had to proclaim himself the Messiah. And at that point, I must say that most of the Jewish world was on his side. More than half of the Jewish world. We're talking about over a million and a half at that time. In Europe, there were probably 3 million Jews. So we're talking about half the Jewish population.
Leo, real quick, do you remember who wrote that book that you were about to show us? Do you recall the author? And then a question I'm
trying to see if I have it here. Just a second. I might.
Real quick, I just want to acknowledge.
No, because I want to show it to you, but I have to. No,
well, real quick, while you look for that, I just want to thank you for sharing this show on your Facebook and your YouTube channel, because this is new for us to be able to have our guests and share the show.
Yes, sorry, I had to ask my wife.
Here we go.
Yeah,
okay.
This is the book. If you want to have a clear and honest understanding, if you want to believe in conspiracy theories, that's another thing. But this book by Kevin Allen Brock was suggested to me by a Jewish friend who collaborates with me and who has vast knowledge on the subject. And I must say this book has as you can see, the genetic, you can see it probably a little bit if I goes a little bit clear. I don't know if
we can see it. Yeah.
Can you see it?
Uh-huh.
It says here, what genetic data demonstrates about Ashkenazic origins. This is very important also in relation to the Khazarians. I'm myself a minimum part Ashkenazi, so I definitely wanted to know more about my own roots. Now, you see, this is a very, very in-depth research, because you have, for example, even the native Khazarian personal names. It goes into all the data, the Sabbatarians. It goes into so much detail on every single branch of the Khazarians, which is really finally, and it also gives us the reason why Khazaria was ultimately destroyed. And today, the descendants of those Khazarians very rarely have maintained their Jewish faith, because simply they were in an area that was surrounded by very powerful forces that were expanding in one part or the other. So it talks about the Jews in Belarus, the Jews in Ukraine. And it was in Ukraine that Jacob Frank, the founder of the Frank, because he came 100 years after Shabbatai Zevi. He claimed to be the reincarnation, and he was born in Ukraine. And he brought to the Catholic Church 20,000 Jewish converts. And for that reason, he was nobilitated after he was also persecuted by the church. And he ended up his life as a rich aristocrat in a big palace, this Jacob Frank, who claimed to be the reincarnation of Shabbatai Zevi. Shabbatai Zevi, though, why is it so bad for people, the figure of for Jewish people to have this heresy? Because Shabbatai Zevi claimed everything that is completely antithetic to the Jewish faith. He will basically break every single Jewish rule so to bring in the Messianic era. Let's eat pork. Let's have orgies. He had a wife. He established a sexual magical circle and sexual magical rituals, orgies like Eyes Wide Shut. That comes actually from the Zabbatian Frankist, that kind of stuff. And when we say, for example, yes, Hollywood is full of Jews. Yes, but what kind of Jews? They are not traditional Jews. They are progressive, reformist, whatever. Woody Allen is no traditional Jew. He's a pervert and a pedophile. The fact is that we have the wrong concept because we are ignorant. And so we tend to then blame every Jew. And that is erroneous. That's why it's very important to read books like this, but it's also very important to read books like Volume 9 or Volume 8, which I wrote, and Volume 10, in the last chapter, explains that the protocols of the Elders of Zion became the ideal weapon that the Sabbatian Frankists could use against their own Jewish enemies. They were the ones who sent them to the concentration camps. They were the ones who inspired the Holocaust, together with the uncle of Yasser Arafat. Why are the Jewish people so angry when you say, let's establish another nation, a Palestinian nation? There is a reason. Because the uncle of Arafat, and you remember who Yasser Arafat, the Oslo Treaty, is an important figure for many decades of the Palestinian liberation, and he was the central figure. Well, Arafat itself, his uncle, was best friends with Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini. There is photos of him and he was actually initially. The British intelligence and the Muslim Brotherhood had put him as this great figure, great Mufti, Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. But then when he betrayed England, when he betrayed the British interest in 1936, he went on to move on with the enemies, which were Germany and Italy. And he was transmitting Palestinian propaganda and anti-Semitic propaganda from Italy and from Germany. Now, when I say inspiring the Holocaust, here we're talking about inspiring the Holocaust. We're talking about millions of people who died. Now, you can be a negationist as much as you want, but millions of people died. So it's very difficult for a Jew saying, okay, let's give Arafat heirs the chance to build up the Palestinian nation after they killed the millions of Jews. And when it comes to Gaza, it's kind of difficult to understand what goes on into Gaza until you know the history of Gaza. This is a place, Gaza, that used to be the number one fortress, the number two fortress of the Knights Templars. They had a base on the Temple Mount and one in Gaza, because Gaza was the port. It wasn't the 30 and I don't know how many hundreds of millions spent Joe Biden on building that monstrosity that loses pieces and they have to keep on, this temporary port. No, the Templars had a port and had a fortress. But when Saladin and the Seljuk Turks arrived with their army, and the Templars couldn't guess all the Christians and Jews that were outside the fortress, they were slaughtered, even worse than what happens now to the Muslims. So it's always hate, brings back hate and goes on with more hate, and it's never-ending hate, because when you have created this kind of thing, you will expect that this thing repeats itself against you. So what comes around goes around, and this is sad to say, but this is the reality. The Muslims that we see slaughtered today in Gaza, the Muslim children, were the Christian and Jewish children of 800 years ago, when Saladin was doing the same thing.
You mentioned the Templars.
The Templars themselves,
Constantinople and whatnot, but they were their own mystery school of sorts. One of the early mystery schools, in that they possessed knowledge that would offend the church and made them all heretics. So they kept it a secret for many years. But was there any Freemasonic infiltration into the world at that time, or into?
Okay. Like I said earlier in the show, the secret societies originate in this part of the world, the Middle East, in particular in Syria. When the Vatican wanted to start the Crusades, they needed, of course, to also start their own special knighthoods, because they didn't have any until then. Yeah. And that was the first one to be established, was the Order of the Holy Sepulchre, followed by the Knights Templars. The Knights Templars were inspired by the sect of the Assassins. They copied them and established the same thing for the Christian world. The concept of the ribat in the Muslim world, which is today very popular with the jihadists like Al-Qaeda or ISIS, was a concept that originally the Muslims had of protecting pilgrims by establishing fortresses in which the jihadists will live and protect the pilgrims that will pass and go to Medina, to Mecca, and of course also to Jerusalem, which is considered the third holy site. Now, the concept was copied, like I told you earlier. If it wasn't for the Muslim world, we would paradoxically not have the Crusades, which then went back against the Muslim world. The actual secret societies of the Middle East, with their secrets, including the Assassins, inspired terribly the Knights Templar. In fact, in this book, for the first time, I show, both on the cover here, but also in the book, an archaeological discovery that still to this day, the Turkish government doesn't want to show to the people for fear of reprisal, because this discovery is unprecedented. And I have to thank actually the late Gabriele Mandelkhan, who was the head of the Jerai Sufi order, the only Sufi which I really had a great relationship with up until the end of his life. He died now 14 years ago, but he was a great gentleman and he was very knowledgeable. And I was trying to find evidence for my research, and he sent me this. This is Mohammed with a turban on the cross, found in a Knights Templar church between Syria and Turkey. This is the original Baphomet, which means Mohammed.
Oh, no kidding. Wow.
So this is a scoop that I have in my book and that I preserved for this book. For many years, I wanted to bring out this book, but I did it only this year because this is the year that my son will be 18 years of age, and I never spoke to him. It was taken to me when he was only 1 year and a half, and I was never given the possibility to have any contact, but I wanted to dedicate this book, and I wanted to explain also to him, as to many people who are able to understand the importance of this book, what goes on really in the Muslim world today. Now, those Assassins from the Shia Nizari Assassins that were in the various fortresses, in particular Alamut, with this old man of the mountain. He had been initiated in this lodge in Cairo, which I talked to you before, the one of the Fatimid dynasty. That lodge in Cairo produced many different sects and schisms and religious schisms, like even the Druze, for example, also, which are still very relevant to this day. But the Nizari Ismaili, which still exist, which gave birth to the Ashashins, and which today obey the Aga Khan, which is like this pontifex figure of the Ismaili world, which is still a very important, with millions of adherents, especially in places like India and Pakistan and so on. But they are not traditional Muslims. Now, the Nizari Ashashins had beliefs that were not orthodox, because no Muslim will ever represent the image of Muhammad. No Muslim will ever put Muhammad on a cross. That would be like, whoa. And that's why the Turkish authorities have not showed this cross in the museums, because they are afraid that they will blow up the museum. It would be as simple as that. However, the Nizari Ashashins were the first ones who inspired the modern style of the jihadists of today. The Salafi jihadists of today is, so many people will say, but Leo, the Salafi jihadists are Sunni. How is it possible they were inspired by Shiites? Well, that is a story which I also tell in my book, which goes through several centuries, and which eventually will see also the help of Western Freemasonry. Because when Western Freemasonry wanted to create this new form of modern Islam, which will actually become a backwards medieval form of Islam, with jihadists that will come and cut your throat like ISIS or Al-Qaeda and so on, they had to base it on something. And the Ashashins were mercenaries, and they started to work for the Templars against their competition, which were the Sunni. So the Vatican knew that these different factions of Islam were fighting against each other, and following the ancient Latin motto, divide et conquer, dividi et impera, they simply played one against the other so they could control better the Middle East. So I tried in this book to explain that it was also our fault if today we have, actually it is mainly our fault here in the West and the Western Freemasons, if we have today the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and all the other groups, Boko Haram, whatever. They are all agents of today. These terrorists work mainly for NATO. They are a tool of the military-industrial complex. Let's create a war. 9/11.
Yeah.
And 9/11 is explained in my book very much in details as these modern heirs of the Assassins come. Who was the head of the chain of terrorists that plotted for 9/11 here in the US? It was an Egyptian, Mohammed Atta. Just like Hassani Sabah went to Cairo, Mohammed Atta comes from there. And if you actually study how these people put together this whole thing, then you understand that it's not only an inside job, meaning, of course, Bush and meaning Dick Cheney and all those people. This couldn't have been possible without these modern heirs to the Templars, which are Freemason, Dick Cheney, Bush. These are modern heirs to the Templars, okay? So these modern heirs to the Templars use their alliance, just like hundreds of years ago, to create chaos and go and kill their competition. And that's how 9/11, unfortunately, took place. And it destabilized forever America. America was never the same after that. It is like we are seeing that from these assassins, from this order of assassins, we can, if we follow all the history of my book, we get to 9/11 and this mega ritual, which was made to absorb all this hate and then push it with in a direction which was Afghanistan, Iraq, and all these useless wars that didn't produce anything positive whatsoever, wasted billions of dollars, and at the same time, as you know, they also limit our freedoms here in the United States of America.
Nailed it.
So it's a win-win, because for them, for the Illuminati like George W. Bush or his father, because these guys, the year after 9/11, I show in my book, there was a George W. Bush hanging out with the Saudi prince in Texas, who was in charge of all these people and financing them. You see, the Salafi world created these two realities. One is the Wahhabi, which gives the money and the sponsorship for this terrorism. And on the other side, you have the Salafi jihadists, who are the desperados of these third world countries or these poor Muslim countries that are constantly kept in a state of desperation and poverty. And so they can recruit them and then send them for these wild missions. When we go and study Muhammad Atta, we know that this guy, he wasn't a pious Muslim every Friday in the mosque. He had a beautiful lady, cocaine, hashish, and drugs are fundamental, especially hashish consumption, for the assassin, for the assassin. Why? Because in the initiation of the assassins, of the order of assassins, they were blindfolded, brought into a garden full of beautiful ladies, of honey, of this and that and all the other. They were taken off the blindfold and said, "This is paradise. This awaits you if you give your life for the order." And that is what happened. In fact, we have evidence that Muhammad Atta and the terrorists of 9/11, before 9/11, they smoked hashish, they watched pornographic videos, and they acted like the assassins in the old days, with the promise of the 72 virgins and all that BS that, of course, is part of the brainwashing that was. But it wasn't in the early stages of Islam that we see that form of jihadism. In the early stage of Islam, with the Sunni and with the first Muslims that followed Prophet Muhammad, we see mostly a expansion in a conquering, in a traditional knighthood way. Even Saladin, who fought against the Knights Templars, he will incarcerate them, but he will then free them if there was a, give for money. They were treated in a way respecting the clauses of war. With the assassins, there was no clauses of war. They will dress up as a woman, come in the middle of the night, slit your throat, kill you, blow the whole place up. This is what has given birth, unfortunately, to modern jihadism, which has no respect for life. And we see it, and possibly we will see it very soon in the Olympics in France. And that's very sad, because I explained this on leozagami.com on my website, that there is in preparation a drone attack on the Eiffel Tower, that might destroy the symbol of Paris during the Olympics, because that is what they need at the moment. They need.
So you're seeing a chaotic summer in France.
I hope not.
Okay,
but the problem is,
the river.
I explained
right. The river. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, the river runs right through where the Olympics.
I know you got something to say.
I'm always so riveted, Leo, whenever we speak, but the questions are definitely piling up.
Please.
And the first one I'd like to give to Carol in the audience, who asked about Mount Hermon in Israel. Do you have any thoughts on Mount Hermon and its significance?
Okay, everything that has to do with labor Zionism, okay, and everything that has to do, unfortunately, with the foundation of Israel itself is labor Zionist in essence. That's why we have even the kibbutz, which are a socialist model of living together, if you think about it. Why is that? Because when Theodor Herzl, the guy who is seen as the founder of the Zionist movement, he's like the father, no? And here I might take out something else for you that might be interesting, because not very few people have the Encyclopedia of Zionism, but the Encyclopedia of Zionism gives you the idea of who is considered the father of modern of Zionism right at the start, and he's Theodor Herzl, this gentleman here. But this gentleman here, if we study the encyclopedia, and there is 2 volumes, so it's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of stuff. The Theodor Herzl was a nationalist. But after the Congress he did in Switzerland, the first Zionist Congress, he immediately got infiltrated by the Sabbatean Frankists. And the Sabbatean Frankists transformed the Zionist movement in a socialist, communist. I mean, it was like his idea would be taken over very soon by people who wanted to push instead this progressive side of Judaism, which in essence is destroying real Judaism. And of course, then on the other side, you have the more conservative factions that then emanated those messianic schools that we see in the Temple Mount, with the more conservative side of Judaism that wants to reestablish and build the fair temple. Now, that comes from British Israelism, from the fact that Freemasonry in Great Britain and the Anglican Church worked behind the scenes for a very long time to push these Jews back into Israel, and at the same time they also saw themselves as the lost tribe of Israel. Great Britain and the English people and they were kind of promoting this idea that they were the lost tribe. Now they made books. I mean, they went on this is one of the books I talk about in my book. This is a very old copy, very rare copy of a book from this is actually with a sign 1899, but it was of a very important gentleman that is regarded as the father of neurolinguistics, and I had it through a friend of his who left me his copy. In fact, here you can see the Korsibinsk here. Now, this book, see the title, Anglo-Israel, the Saxon race. And here it says a series of 9 lectures that provided the lost tribes of Israel, because they promoted this idea that they were the lost tribe. On the contrary of Germany or Russia, which gave birth, unfortunately, Russia to the pogroms and Germany to the Holocaust. And of course, there was a lot of persecution of these Jews. So in the end, the Jews were pushed left, right, and center, and ended up with no choice than going back to this place, which was their promised land. Now, a lot of those people will have stayed in their countries if they could, but they were literally, I mean, there was so much persecution going on. It was growing anti-Semitism that happened also because of publications like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, that later on were embraced by the Islamic public, of course. And so we find in the 1920s this unusual union between Iran, with the first Pahlavi, who thought of himself as the nation of the Aryans, because the Iranians Aryans. So he said, wow, we are the Aryans. We have to embrace what Hitler says. Hitler probably, when he saw the Aryans of Iran, would say, these people are way too dark to be the Aryans I have in mind, but no, it doesn't matter. In any case, and so he married that, and he persecuted, and there was a persecution of the Jews. The same thing happened with then there was, of course, Russia. Russia was the nation that printed the first Protocols of the Elders of Zion, with the Tsar and his family endorsing this book, which was their downfall, because they ended up being dissolved in acid because of that. Okay, So, I mean, or wherever they were dissolved in live cement or whatever they were dissolved in. But they ended up in a very bad place because they embrace this this anti-Semitic view. And at the same time, the Sabbatean Frankists, they were part of the Bolsheviks, and they took over the Soviet Union, and they established something that was completely antithetic to the traditional Jewish view. So you see, the worst enemy of the Jews seems to be very much the Jew. In the case of the Bolsheviks, or in the case of Adolf Hitler, who was himself a Sabbatean product. Rabbi Malvin Alterman writes that Adolf Hitler was a product of a Sabbatean Frankist ritual in 1888. That he had Jewish blood, but it was the blood of the Sabbateans. So this means that the Holocaust that was incentivized, that was somehow cultivated by these Jews that were the enemy of the Jews. They were the ones that created the basis for the most terrible crime in humanity, which is the Holocaust. And so it's very sad that this happens, because only an honest, intellectual Jewish person will tell you the worst enemy of the Jew is the Jewish person. They will, they will always like to blame somebody else. But I must say that on the contrary of the Muslim, the Jewish intellectual people who are honest are much more. In the Muslim world, unfortunately, to this day, there is nobody. I mean, I have received only 5-star reviews and compliments, even from Sufis, for this book, who have written reviews. You can go and read it on Amazon, saying, I'm a Sufi, but I can say this book is great, because I base this book on facts, not on fiction, not on speculation. There is over 700 citations here, and of credible and important sources. So today's situation in the Middle East can only be solved once the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims face their own demons and what they have done in the past. All of them have sinned. All of them have embraced at some point a satanic cult. Yep. With the Jews, it goes back to the Erev Rav, the moment in which Moses left and those people, followed him, the witch doctors of ancient Egypt and all the others, the magicians of ancient, because they saw how powerful he was, and they incentivized this heretical trend that manifested in the worship of the golden calf. And Moses got so angry that he broke the Ten Commandments and had to go back up and get them. So, I mean, he got pretty angry. Then you have the Christians, who should have never started the Crusades, who should have never really embraced the idea that Jesus called for a holy war, because he never did. And so, yes, they might wanted to protect the pilgrims, but what was the result of it all is that nowadays the Muslim world is always saying, the Crusader. No, it's not
true, yeah.
So, and then you have the Muslims who like to blame Greater Israel, the Freemasons, everybody else, and then they have Freemasons in the Muslim world that they don't like to criticize. They don't like to analyze Islamic Freemasonry. Here I put all their names, their rituals, the dates, and everything, and I say, face your own demons. There is a Grand Lodge of Iran in exile here, who has stolen all the money of Iran, and basically coming, and it's here in Los Angeles, actually in Santa Monica Boulevard, they have their headquarters. The Grand Lodge of Iran in exile, and this is another important, many things that you will find interesting in this book. In January 1979, the Vatican asked the help of the Sicilian mafia, the Sicilian mob, and one of the biggest mobsters also here in America, to arrange the whole thing, to go and pick up all the gold together with the Freemasons of Iran that will pave the way for the Shah to leave Iran. but leave Iran with all the gold of Iran. And they stole it. But when Ayatollah Khomeini came in front of the cameras, we are now taking over and establish the Republic of Iran, and the Shah left with nothing else than his clothes on. Yes, sure, bullshit.
Well, real quick, Leo. So
just to interrupt you a second, but this is another important revelation in this book. The next thing we know, and it's revealed by Mehmet Ali Akçay, the guy who attempted the assassination of the Pope, Khomeini, because he knew that the money ended up in the Vatican, the gold ended up in the Vatican Bank, he employed Mehmet Ali Akçay to go and kill John Paul II. Now you can continue.
Wow.
No, well, I want to get to my questions in a moment, but I know Scott has a few first, so please, you go ahead.
Oh, what? Well, the one that's coming to mind first, this is just mind-blowing material.
So I'm just going to sit back.
Well, we're going back to Medina for a moment to Mecca and this big black cube.
Yeah,
the black cube has always been symbolic of Saturn and Saturn worship, which has its associations with Satan worship and all kinds of other things. But the Jews as well, as you know, they'll put the cube on their forearm or their forehead, and it's the 7 wraps of leather to indicate the rings of Saturn. What can you describe? I mean, because this is on both sides, the black cube.
Yeah, think about what Stanley Kubrick was trying to say to us in a book that was, of course, written also with Arthur C. Clarke, that manifests the original version, which I told you has Saturn rather than Jupiter. And I think that this changing one for the other was kind of deliberate to confirm, to make it a little bit less obvious, because this film is almost like a modern book of Revelation. It's like a modern gospel. It tells us about the origins of humanity that are aided by the aliens, okay? And of course, you saying the Jewish have it, the other one. We are talking about pre-Islamic time, but also pre-Abrahamic time. So where is Abraham taking off in all this? Abraham takes off from the model, from what now is still known, even if it's in ruins, as the city of Ur. Now, the city of Ur, which was one of the most powerful headquarters for the Illuminati of ancient Mesopotamic times, became the birthplace of the Abrahamic faith. That's where the house of Abraham is. No? So that is when we can really understand a little bit more of what is happening today. In the middle of the pandemic, the Pope, who had already established the human fraternity with the Imam of Al-Azhar from Cairo, which is an emanation of the Lodge of Cairo, goes to Iraq and celebrates a mass with the Muslims and the Jews in the city of Ur. That is Anunnaki stuff. If you think about it, we are right at the center. So this whole thing predates, of course, Christianity, as well as predates Judaism, as well as predates, of course, the Islamic faith, which is the most recent one. So we go back to the fact that Saturn, and then you have Sirius. So it's Sirius, Saturn, Earth. And there is a connection there that is the connection of the gods. That's why the dog star Sirius is mentioned also in the Quran. And when I remember still, when I once went to some Sufis and I was just chatting, I said, there is this couple of passages about Sirius. They opened their eyes, they were like, how you know about that? Well, I read it, it's on the book. No, but you must know more then, because only the Illuminati know about Sirius. So it's very serious to talk about Sirius. Okay, maybe no. So the actual cube, which is also the perfect ashlar, if we go and see really the original version of this monolith in Arthur C. Clarke's account, it was a perfect ashlar. And that is really what you have in Freemasonry with you when you arrive to the Master Mason degree and you arrive to perfectionate yourself. And so you levigate this stone in a way that it becomes the perfect asher. So we have this connection, and it's a very strong connection that we also find in the United Nations headquarters in New York, where we have this monolith in this chamber of I don't know what. Because, yeah, so
you find it everywhere. I mean, the cube, even the world's foremost private intelligence agency is called Black Cube. It's mostly Mossad agents, ex-Mossad agents. Harvey Weinstein actually employed them when he was having his more recent troubles. But you know, they're pretty well known, and that was obviously, I think, an homage to Saturn.
Saturn is also connected to Set. Set,
yes,
becomes then one of those ancient Egyptian gods which we find with Osiris in this conflict that then brings him to eventually resurrect. But we have also Horus, we have Isis. When Freemasonry, modern speculative Freemasonry, started to expand in the Middle East, they kind of started to merge with the preceding, the mystery schools of old that were already there. And the Rite of Memphis was very successful. The Cairo Lodge is a product of this old Illuminati school that evolved in Alexandria, where was also the home of Gnosticism and the home of a lot of knowledge, which was destroyed, as you know, when the library was destroyed. And it was destroyed first by the Christians, who didn't want certain things to come out that were not accepted within their version of Christianity, and then later on by the Muslims, who completely obliterated whatever was left. So it's like destroying knowledge to preserve in secret such knowledge. Every time they have destroyed a book, don't ever think they haven't made a copy and they hid it in their own archive, because that would be totally stupid to think of that. They simply gave the world an idea that they were destroying these books, because then these books were never to be found again. And where are these books? Well, they're all in the Vatican archives, of course, so that we know for sure. So they're all there together with the evidence of what we have discussed partly today. So the secret societies of the Middle East, they established two bases that were very important, and they were kind of like trying to be one better than the other. They were fighting against each other at one point for the primacy of this. One was the House of Knowledge, established during the Fatimid dynasty by the Cairo Lodge and by the sixth Fatimid Caliph, who thought of himself as a god. And in fact, at one point, he was using, though, the religion to oppress people, while in private, in his lodge, he was saying religion is BS and we only have to rely on science and reason. So it's like oppress the masses with the religion is something. Even Jamaluddin al-Afghani, this guy was saying we have to use the religion to oppress the Muslim faith. And nowadays the Muslims are like Jamaluddin al-Afghani, oh, the father of modern Islam, such a holy guy. For a holy guy, what? Are you eluding them? So that's what I don't understand of the Muslim world. And I was part of that Muslim world, because in this book I explain my own experience, how I was in Egypt, how I went to research the Cairo Lodge, and how, thanks to the Butrus Ghali family, to the family of Butrus Ghali, the Ghali family, which is a very important family in Egypt, protectors of the Coptic Church, I finally had the possibility of meeting representatives of the Brotherhood of Luxor. And Jamaluddin al-Afghani was a representative of the Brotherhood of Luxor and considered by Madame Blavatsky one of the hidden masters. This guy, the father of modern Islam, was hanging out with Madame Blavatsky, guys. He was going to Russia. He was going around the Illuminati lodges and Freemason lodges of Europe. They were very much into also practicing the ancient Isis rites and other practices. In Mecca, we know there were 360 gods. They eliminated those gods at one point once Muhammad came back with his, after all his decades spent in Medina to try to expand this religion. Once this religion became really powerful, they eventually converted forcefully the people in Mecca, and Muhammad himself went there and destroyed all the statues. This is the account that they like to give. Initially, Muhammad himself actually capitulated to the pagan world and wrote what is known as the Satanic Verses, in which he actually is mentioning the three goddesses that were more worshipped in Mecca as not too bad after all. Nowadays, these verses are very criticized. In fact, they gave birth to that novel that ended up with a fatwa from Khomeini of Salman Rushdie, as you know. So the Mecca had 360 deities, but when these deities disappear, just like the pagan world disappears, where does it end up? It ends up in the secret societies. Now, there was a secret society that the Sabbatean Frankists worked and operated with, that was known as the Sat Bahai. The Sat Bahai had 360 degrees, just like the deities of ancient Mecca. The pre-Islamic goddesses, like, for example, Sin, which is a very important goddess at the time of Ishtar. Sin is considered one of the most important. It was the patron goddess of the city of Haran, founded by the city of Ur, another very important location for the Illuminati, the city of Haran, because it inspired Freemasonry through the establishment of a secret society called the Brethren of Sincerity, which around the year 1000 was involved in that other center of knowledge that was kind of competing with Cairo, which was Baghdad and the House of Wisdom, which will be eventually destroyed later on by the Mongols. But this, as you can see, there is all these secret societies, all these Islamic factions fighting each other. For a normal person, it's almost impossible to understand what is going on. And so I think that for the first time with this book, giving the fact that I actually tried to also explain it in a way that even the non-Muslim understands, or the non-initiated. So you actually find things that even Muslims themselves at times don't know, because they are either forbidden to study, or either they are not encouraged to study, but are in their hadiths, in their teachings of the Quran, and so on. Like the fact that Muhammad himself was inspired by an Ebionite Christian priest who was the cousin of his first wife. And so this is another important connection, because the Ebionites were a very specific kind of Christian sect that didn't embrace the divinity of Jesus, and that's why in the Quran you don't have Jesus as a god. And so I think that 360, somebody say, why 360? It gives you also a kind of idea now. But that it was 360 was the deities they had in Mecca. They were not 365. Probably they need another 5, or maybe they had another 5 that were kept secret. Who knows? Complete round. No, I think that the pantheon of the gods of Mecca was eliminated, but the central belief of Mecca, this monolith, that was central to Stanley Kubrick's film, and of course also the book of with Arthur C. Clarke. This is central. So I think if we have to go back thousands and thousands of years and position the scene that we see in the first opening of 2001 Space Odyssey, well, that scene probably took place in contemporary Mecca. And that's why people are still going around it like this. Yeah. And they went around like this, not only when they were Muslims, but also when they were, before they were Muslims. The Muslims simply absorbed something that was pre-existing, just like they absorbed the moon because it was the moon goddesses they were absorbing in the territories that they were conquering.
So the tradition in Mecca, you're saying, is more ancient than Islam itself.
Absolutely.
That the circling took place long prior to. Wow, that's fascinating.
Well,
so
we go back. We go back
Yeah.
to the origins. We go back
Mm.
to that transformation that led the primitive monkey into this modern Homo sapiens.
Wow.
And eventually, we are now in 2024 finally going towards the stars and the other planets, though probably we never went to the moon in the first place, and that's why we could never go back to the moon. And that's why Stanley Kubrick also had a propaganda purpose due to his brilliant way of filming that was judged innovative. And it was, of course, nowadays we know why he was very much sought after, and also why he probably left to the last film the most dangerous of the topics, meaning the one of Eyes Wide Shut.
Right. Yeah. We hear a lot about, the Kabbalists, ancient Jewish mysticism, a lot of these traditions, the conjuring of golems and whatnot, and some dark magic traditions. But was there roots or did Freemasonry take root in? Israel's really rather young, 1947, 48. But prior to that, was there any Freemasonic roots or any mystery schools germane
we
to?
talked earlier, I mentioned British Israelis that was created by British Freemasonry. The allegory of British Freemasonry is based on the Temple of Solomon, and of course the Temple Mount being the home of the Temple of it was the ideal place also because, as you know, it became the base of the Knights Templars during the occupation during the Crusades. The Freemasons of the Western world, like I said, take all their knowledge from the Middle East. So wherever you study in the rituals, it's all about the Middle East.
Right.
Either the rites that bring you over from the Master Mason into the rites of perfection of the various kinds in the various rites, but they're all based on stuff that went on in the Middle East. It's very rare that we find elements that come from Asia because let's say that when it comes to the Chinese or the Tibetan or that kind of cultures, they were probably way too distant, though the Jesuits immediately wanted to have that knowledge and send their first missionaries there to absorb that knowledge that they couldn't have. So Freemasonry in itself, Islamic Freemasonry, might have been a product in its modern version, the speculative, of the colonists coming from Great Britain and France, bringing them this new thing and merging them, though, with what was already pre-existing. So Islamic elements became much more natural to absorb within Freemasonry, and that's why eventually we will have also the birth of the Shriners, which today are, of course, known to parade around the streets with their fez and their Islamic names and stuff. But the Shriners were kicked out of Mecca as fake Muslims. A long time ago, they were kicked out of Mecca, and if you study the rituals, you can understand also why. I mean, they might have a lot of references to Islam, but they are not always respectful of the religion of Islam.
Well, I have a quick question. Because some people may not be familiar with you.
Yeah.
And if they're watching the show if they're watching on your channels, which we thank you, they are. If they're just tuning in or if this is their first time, your books are Confessions of Illuminati Insider. How would you describe in an elevator pitch or to the person that's first hearing about you what the insider aspect was, and how is it you're able to share this information, and where is it that you get the information from, whether it's experience or downloads or etc.? I think that'd be really good for people to understand.
No, I mean, I've never hidden that it was a direct experience within the New World Order, within certain secret societies. When I, for example, explain Aleister Crowley and his connection to Islam in this book, I also explain my own experiences within the Ordo Templi Orientis, which features both Mansur al-Alaj and Saladin in their initiations. When I was taking the blindfold off at the Minerval degree of the OTO, suddenly I had a Muslim scenario with a guy with a scimitar and a white turban and all dressed in white. And I thought, this is weird, because I was expecting an Egyptian style film,
Right.
you know? Instead, Muslim, Islam, what is this? Then, you know, I connected also the fact they call themselves OTO Caliphate, but there was also always those people who say, oh, Caliphate is because, of course, it's also a way of Crowley of being funny, California, Caliphate, his followers in California, so Cali. But in reality, they were also very much connected to Islam. And there is a connection to Islam, because when you get to what is equivalent to the Master Mason degree in the OTO, you are introduced to Mansur al-Alaj, that takes the place of Hiram Abif in Freemasonry. So you have the tomb of Mansur al-Alaj rather than the tomb of Hiram Abif in the third degree. And it was actually Aleister Crowley who went to Cairo, where you had the Cairo Lodge, and was initiated by a Sufi sect, the Aisawa. And this Aisawa was then transformed in an anagram in Aivas, which was the messenger of Horus that he channels the stuff from. So when you tell me where you get your stuff from, it's from me being a 33rd degree and a Masonic historian, many years in different rites of Freemasonry, and also going and being directly involved with these people in the Middle East, in Turkey. I risked my life for this knowledge, and of course, I could have kept my mouth shut and probably live a much more comfortable life. But my mission in life was different. And so that's why I'm happy that today I was able to present this new book, as prior to that, I presented many others with you. And I hope we can continue in the future doing this.
Of course.
Yeah, I'm really rather grateful you chose the path that was a little less comfortable.
It's less comfortable. I mean,
yes.
you know, if you want a comfortable path, you should not choose this kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's not about making easy money, because there's no easy money to be made. Here is about spreading the truth. And I say to the people who follow me also when I do my shows, of course, we like to have some kind of gratification or to be able to continue in our mission. But there has been times that have been very difficult, times that I had to sacrifice really a lot. And my wife also has worked very hard on these books by editing them and working together with me on this whole project, which has, as you know, we did 5 books with Brad Olsen. We now did more books also with our own Cursum Perficio. And I hope that people appreciate the honesty that of our intentions. There is nothing nefarious here. It's simply following what the gospel is, the main gospel that what we see cited also at the entrance of Langley, Virginia. Know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Well, we think that the truth needs to be revealed in the end times more than before, because we don't have much time before the cyber Satan that has manifested from an algorithm that came out of the Islamic world, because algorithm comes, the word algorithm, from an Islamic thinker. Algebra is like they let the genie out of the bottle. And now that cube that we saw in Stanley Kubrick, but we see it 3 times. We see it at the beginning, we see it in the middle on the moon, and we see it at the end of the story. But at the end of the story, the other big protagonist is, of course, Cyber Satan, HAL 9000, like I say in volume 6.66. I mean, Kubrick has basically prophesied everything.
Now,
You know,
your wife is always welcome on the show too, if you'd like her to join.
She
absolutely.
doesn't like to be too public, but maybe one day I will convince her. I think
And you
she's
know,
preparing-
your
she's preparing
other
a-
or better.
she's preparing a cookery book, and I'm sure that she will have to present it in the future when we will let our viewers know what the Zagamis eat, which is not because it's a very serious cookery book that will also make you really a king in your own kitchen and eat like a king. Eat like
That's very important.
Huh?
And so when it's time for her to showcase her work, because we're very supportive of women on our show, she's
Absolutely.
welcome as well. So go ahead.
And she's also quite stunning, and I admire your marriage greatly. You seem to be,
she's like,
and she can hear
thank
me.
you so much. Thank you so much. We try to carry on in our mission together. And now I have also, as you know, this year, this is my first book that I published as an American citizen. After many years, I had to give up my Italian citizenship because in Italy I was persecuted. And we left Italy in 2019 without really any certainty of what will happen here in America. And America, though, has treated us very well. So we like to thank all the people, our readers, and all the people who keep on supporting us.
Yeah, and to respond to what you said earlier about the sacrifices you've made in the name of truth, our show is called Truthstream for a reason, and we might have found a much greater degree of comfort had we chosen a different path, but I think probably in the end a lot of discomfort, having known that we could have done something to contribute to, bringing the truth to the people.
Absolutely. Somebody is saying, what part of Italy? Well, Rome is my hometown where I was born and raised, but I'm also half Sicilian. And unfortunately, the mafia itself was also created by Islam, as I explain in this book. There is an inspiration that is direct when Sicily was itself an emirate for a period. And people might not know this, but Sicily was a Muslim place for a long time. And so during that time, unfortunately, the tax they were forcing businesses to pay for non-Muslims became the basis for the future mob, for the future money request that the mafia has done ever since to all the businesses, like it happens in Little Italy. You have a restaurant, you have to pay the mob, if you want a protection. But the same thing started and originated from the period in which the Muslims were there in Sicily.
Wasn't Meyer Lansky, though, kind of in the middle there? Didn't he perfect it before the Sicilians really?
Well, you always have to have a Sabbatean and maybe next to the Muslims to help them out. A lot of people don't know, but the Shiite religion was actually launched by Saba, who was a Jew. So, I mean, the Shiites who today are there hitting themselves and hating the Jews, every day, and talking about the greater Israel as this great conspiracy and all they actually have a Muslim Jew who helped them. So this is, you see, you always find elements that are interesting and that also very controversial, and that of course are not discussed by the historians or the Muslims themselves because maybe they have a sense of shame. But it's about being honest in the end times. It's about saying, I have sinned, you have sinned, we have all sinned, and nobody can just go on the pedestal and act as, this almighty pure force of God when they are not.
Exactly. A comment that jumped out at me was from Alton Bryce, and he mentioned the Sanhedrin court being the oldest Jewish court on the planet, from where they essentially rule the planet. What do you have to say about the Sanhedrin court?
I would say this, that there is no single organization that rules the planet. There is rather two groups of people who rule the planet are the Jesuits and the Sabbatean Frankists. One is, of course, known for having control of the spiritual world, which is the Jesuits from the Vatican. And the other one is the Sabbatean Frankists that control the economic system through the banking cartel, people like the Rothschilds and so on. So here we have the people. Then you have the Luciferian court that consists of the Illuminati. And then under you have the Freemasons and the secret societies that we have been discussing. The Sufis are aiming to become Illuminati of some kind, but they are all manipulated constantly by these two groups of people these days. So once you have this idea of the pyramid and where it, how it controlled the nobility, the black nobility, how it's controlled. But when you go in the black nobility, you find also a lot of Iranian blood. I have myself Iranian blood. I'm a proof of it. Zagami actually means Zaham. It's actually the place where we come from. It's a little island called Ali Kudi, which is the Rock of Ali. So this idea that people have that the Islamic world is external to all this, no, it's part of of this Illuminati force that is present all over the world. So there is, of course, counterparts to Freemasonry in the Chinese world, Islamic Illuminati. But you have also Chinese Illuminati, you have also Tibetan Illuminati, you have also Hindu Illuminati or Freemasons. It's a global conspiracy. So you said it's a single group of people, of Jews who are doing, no, that's not possible. But definitely they have a big say today, the Sabbatean Frankists, who almost single-handedly control the whole of the Jewish world, because reformist, progressive Jews, they all depend, unfortunately, from the Sabbatean heresy. They were all started somehow by the Sabbatean heresy. And the poor victims of it are the Jews who honestly believe in their religion, just like the honest Christians who believe in God and in their faith in an honest way, or there might also be some honest Muslims who does the same. Though the Muslims have, unfortunately, a problem that because the Quran is also a vehicle, like I said earlier, the Sharia to impose law, they seem to be more restricted and controlled and less free to be really in a genuine relationship with God that is not, it's not crafted with all these limitations, this bigotry, this control, this oppression that is, of course, well arranged by the people on top, who are using all religions, let's be honest, to manifest their one world order and their one world religion, and in the end bring up this Antichrist, which will probably soon manifest, and we will see with our own eyes.
There's a lot of evidence of massive satanic influence in the Vatican, and we hear a lot of stories about the Red Shoe Club. I'm sure you're familiar. The idea that these shoes are made from the skin of children, that were utilized in satanic ritual practice and whatnot. But can you shed any light on that?
Well, the only
if anybody can, it would be you.
Yeah, no. The only time I spoke with actually a gentleman who was in one of my lodges, a credible guy who is a doctor. I mean, he told me that once in the Vatican he had the opportunity of seeing all these red cape people wearing these shoes, and he was like freaked out by the whole thing. Now, I personally never had this experience, so I will not be able to vouch for it, but the guy is pretty serious. He himself was a Freemason and a member of various secret societies, including a very important and ancient one, which is based in Naples, because Naples was the place where some of the magicians who followed Cleopatra when he married Julius Caesar parked and built up a very strong magical community. And this magical community, it kind of still exists to this day. And there is an underground world in Naples, which is also a very magical town in itself. But there is, of course, also a very magical world in Rome, though the energy that we see in Rome is not always positive. Actually, most of the time, the energy that emanates in Rome is fairly negative because of the Vatican.
Sure.
Yeah, my grandmother used to say "Affanabula," go to Naples, and I said, Mom, what does she mean? She says she's saying go to hell.
Okay, go to hell. Well, Naples, you see, for example, my great grandmother was from Naples, and my wife also has her great grandparent from Naples. Is a place of great creativity next to a volcano. It's a place, though, that has unfortunately had thousands of years of oppressive rulers, and today is the home to one of the most fearless mafias called the Camorra. And so it's kind of still backwards because of that. It doesn't progress. It's a city that, unfortunately, for that reason, doesn't progress. But we will see, maybe in our lifetime, another time, the Vesuvius explodes. And the Vesuvius seems to explode almost in a form of punishment every time because of the sins of this city.
Yeah, boy, I will never forget when I was a child seeing all of the bodies frozen in place.
What
a sight!
Oh, you were there.
Oh, I was there.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a beautiful place. I remember, my sister and I would catch sea urchins on the
but all this, remember, all this was part of ancient Rome. Ancient Rome, a big empire, a mega empire that laid the foundation for, so when Julius Caesar married Cleopatra, to one of the most important alliances between the East of the West that was ever seen. It was for that reason that Caesar was eventually killed. He was feared because of this new alliance that had brought to Rome the feared magicians of ancient Egypt. The Illuminati of ancient Egypt were finally in Rome. But if you think about it, they never really disappeared, because after the Vatican is their modern heirs. So they still go and still dominate the Catholic world, which, just as the Muslim world absorbed the preceding pagan world. You see, like I said before, with the 360 gods of American, but in the ancient Roman Empire, there were a bunch of gods. And when Christianity eventually became the main religion, it didn't just obliterate and destroy these preceding faiths. They just transformed. Maybe with a number of saints. How many saints there are in a year? Just go in a calendar. And all those saints manifest a different nature of God. So I'm not saying necessarily paganism can't be then in somehow understood within a monotheistic concept if we see it as a different emanations of God. In Islam, they have the 99 names of God, or in the Jewish tradition, you have also a number of names for God. But it is the different sides of God that we are talking about in this case.
Well, I mean, even in our nation's capital, there's an awfully big obelisk, as you will see in so many cities. Those are traditions that continue to live on. Very few people understand symbolism.
We study the 72 names of God. We study the Jewish Kabbalah, or we study Islam, or we study all this. We will always find eventually behind these Abrahamic faiths something pagan in nature. However, ultimately, there is one creator that has emanated all this. So we stick to him without losing ourselves. It's almost like the ancient people, because they didn't have football, they didn't have soccer, they didn't have the Hollywood stars, they didn't have a lot of things. They had to rely on all these gods to just, or for their interest, their entertainment, the stories of these gods that encountered also with their encounters with mankind. They become all part of this pagan world. Today, of course, the pagan world is still present behind the scenes with certain lodges, certain rites of Freemasonry, and certain I would say, certain secret societies that are part of what I describe as the Illuminati network. So I think that today we have really dug very deep into all this.
Yeah.
I know that there is a lot of people here on the chat with a lot of questions. If you have anything else before we conclude.
Yeah, we want to be respectful of your time. I could listen to you for days on end. I can't tell you how much I enjoy when you come on the show.
Well, somebody was talking about the ley lines. Now, the ley line subject is a subject that is in volume 8 of my Confessions, and it's a very important subject because it's also part of what Hollywood is. Hollywood is on an important ley line for that reason. But everything that was established by the Illuminati, by the Freemasons in ancient times was based on these ley lines, these emanations of power, of energy, that somehow also, we were talking a moment ago about the pagan world that gets absorbed by the monotheistic, but then the ley lines are still present in certain paths, like the paths of a particular angel like Michael, we call it in Italy, has a specific path made of ley lines. Within Europe, there is various important ley lines, and there is, of course, also here in America. I want to thank those people who were also sending their love to me and Christy here in the chat. I want to say hello also to them, very kind of them. You have a wonderful audience, and I managed, I think, somehow to broadcast on also my channels. I don't know if it worked out. I'm not that technical, but it worked out. So we managed to merge our audiences together today, and it seems to be a great mix.
Excellent. Yeah, it's quite a community. We're pretty happy.
Great community.
Yeah, well, this is the first time. This is really cool because we're still navigating aspects of the live. And now what's great is you actually were able to share it so quickly. I didn't even know that you were able to do that. So I want to say thank you to your audience for watching the show on your Facebook and your YouTube. And please check us out on Truthstream. And, we do have a Facebook channel. We do have a YouTube channel. We don't really promote it very much because
I think that today what we do also on our side is to promote more the Rumble. And what we do actually on our show, we do part of our show on Facebook and YouTube, and the second part of the show on Rumble for specific reasons that you can imagine how to do with the censorship and the algorithms. So I of course know that today, and I kind of restricted maybe, apart from the fact that if you don't discuss things that nowadays we know what they are, you don't get in trouble. It's almost obvious what they don't like you to speak of. But I think that it wasn't even pertinent to what we were discussing today. So we
need to share. Okay, knowing that, we need to share your Rumble channel then.
Yes, we have a Rumble.
Okay, we're going to put that in the chat.
The problem with the Rumble, though, is you can't do. You see, like now I inserted the Facebook and YouTube just quickly, and I managed, but I can't do it from StreamYard. It has to be done from Rumble to insert this. So it becomes a little bit different because you have to insert the RTPM code and all the rest. Instead, with Facebook and YouTube, you can do it just as you go and extend it.
Okay, well, we put your Rumble channel in the chat.
Yeah, check Leo out. This is,
thank you so much. Thank you so much. Days. We have been the victims of censorship, just like you. And we had 17 channels removed from YouTube. And it's really great now that we
17 channels.
17 channels. From October 2020 through the whole pandemic and also the elections were like, and some of the reasons that were given, it was just blatant censorship. And I can say also another thing, that I was right on certain things that I said, and I'm happy I said them. And if YouTube was more honest, they should repristinate, because after they came out by apologizing for those things that were actually said back then. involving certain things, without going into the details, because we never know if the algorithm will be triggered again. But maybe in private I will tell you.
Yeah, well, I just want to see, there's been some amazing breaking news today with Dave, and I won't go too in depth in it, but with David Martin being on, Dr. David Martin being on the Alex Jones show, and it's like an hour and 40-minute.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. So we want to talk about that. There's also, and this is something that, when people follow us on our TikTok and our X, and some of our Telegram, there's a woman named Ashayana Dean, and she's since changed her name. I have to find the name she's going by now, but she's doing a workshop, and she's talking about, where humanity really came from. And I just think a lot of our viewers are going to be interested in a lot of this information. And you're a big part of that. And we really appreciate you, not taking the easy road, because a lot of us who are in this movement have not taken the easy road.
Listen,
and we just want to.
I can only tell you this very quickly, because I don't want to go into a whole discussion about it. Right. But in the end, actually, Alex Jones was forced to not have me on any longer. When the CRO came in for the bankruptcy, is requested to take my books out of InfoWars store, and Brad also knows also about it, because we lost a lot of money. And on top of that, to censor me and not have me on the Alex Jones show any longer. So this is what happened after the CRO, after the Sandy Hook family CRO appointed the guy who is in charge there of the bankruptcy. So this means that Leo Zagami is onto something. If I was, little me in front of this $1 billion situation, I was there, mentioned, and taken off the air. So.
Right. I think the first time I saw you was on the InfoWars show.
And it was something that was confirmed also by Rob Du, the producer of Alex Jones, and it was something that then with Alex, in the end, he gave me a band of video channel, which I thank him. But I'm sorry that he was basically forced to censor me, because we are also friends, and so in a way, kind of like created some problems at the beginning, when I didn't really know what was happening. Then when I eventually came to know the whole story, I was like, okay, fine. If it's a badge of honor to be censored by the CRO of this idiocy that wanted to actually close down InfoWars a few days ago. Fortunately, they managed to stay still operational because of the judge decision. So that's
I gotta ask. Okay, just we hear CGI, clones, masks, all this stuff. Now this is a crazy topic. We had Pascal Najati on the show a day or two after he was on InfoWars, and he was claiming that Alex Jones has been replaced, but then a week later or so, he's claiming that he is now JFK Senior, and it's just it's like, I'm sorry, I don't know
about this.
What the hell's going on? But so my question is, what is your take on the clones and the masks and the CGI as an Illuminati insider?
Yeah, how
much theater are we watching?
I don't know about the clones in regards to Alex Jones, because I think that was really the CRO, and a very serious thing that happened to him. As you know, he has this thing pending on him since he lost the cause with the Sandy Hook families, which really it's a very serious thing. So I mean, to say that Alex Jones is not the Alex Jones of the past, yes, he's not the Alex Jones of the past, but not because he's being cloned, but simply because they have blackmailed him and forced him in a corner, and he's now there trying to carry on with his business. And I have much respect for him, because poor guy, he's really left with this fight that he's enduring, and with all the stress that. However,
there's things that happen where. Go ahead. I was just going to say there's things that happen where
we have the technology to produce clones. However, I have never had the confirmation that any of these clones were ever used at such high levels yet. Who knows? Maybe in the future, who knows? But remember that today we don't really need a clone when you can create an hologram in front of your eyes very easily and stuff like that, that deceive people. There's a million ways of deceiving people today. So I don't know if the clone would be such a convenient way. Especially when people are saying, Joe Biden is a clone. No, Joe Biden is an idiot. He's a zombie. I mean, what clone? Clone of what? Clone of what? I mean, so let's be a little bit realistic. I personally don't go for conspiracy theories. The problem is that this is a conspiracy, but it's not a theory. It's a fact. So I base the reality on conspiracy facts. And my books are based on conspiracy facts, but I hope that gives you a clear
and real quick, where can people find you? Obviously there's your website, but anywhere that you can suggest that people can follow you and find you.
Well, leozagami.com. Then there is the Leo Zagami Show YouTube channel. There is also Leo Zagami on Rumble. There is now also Leo Lion Zagami on X, because the Leo Zagami original at Leo Zagami was blocked in 2020, and you can still see it frozen in time, never unfrozen by Elon Musk. So he has actually uncensored a lot of people. He has unblocked a lot of channels, not mine. But I have established a new X in the last.
What can you repeat it one more time? Because I'm gonna request you right now.
Yeah, the X Twitter account is Leo Lion Zagami. The old one is Leo Zagami. So there is a little difference, and is at Ordo Illuminatorum. So you can find me also on X, and I also broadcast there the uncensored part of my show. So thank you for having me on. It was a great chat today with you, gentlemen. It's always a pleasure. But today I think we have dug very much deeper. And I see also that your audience, as well as mine, has appreciated your questions and your lines of thought for today.
Well, I agree. I love having you on. And you know what? This is one request that I think we both can agree with. We certainly don't want it to be another 10 months before you're back on the show.
Well, yeah, we might have to do a show in between books. I know you write fast, but
absolutely. Of course, I will be starting writing a new book, but I'm always available for you guys. And I think we have so much to still talk with all the work that I have laid out in all these books, and also the possible questions that you might have, even after you fully read and understand this book, you might still have some questions about it, and I will always be at your disposal, because you're doing a great job, guys, with this Truthstream project that you have on. You have to resist and continue, and you know, when you continue, then you will receive the awards, not by expecting something in the immediate. You have to build it with years and years. I'm after 17 channels being removed by YouTube, I thought maybe, this is impossible. This is but I persist. And I think that also you guys are persisting, and that's very good.
Yep. We have to keep
one last question. Is it at Leo Lion Zagami at Ordo Universe?
Yes. Absolutely.
That's you. Okay, I found it. I just want to make sure. We're going to follow you, and we'll share that underneath the video.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
And people can on Telegram as well.
Okay.
Telegram. Go read his book. I can't wait to get my hands on the book myself.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Beautiful. And I'm sure that you will find a lot of interesting material. I tried to summarize it today, but you can understand that these books are always 4, 5, more than so many hundreds of pages, that to summarize them and to make them into an hour and a half, it's almost impossible. So today, actually, we managed to go a little bit deeper, let's say, with a couple.
Yeah, well, especially when you have your wife and the beautiful food and everything I'm sure dinner's awaiting. So enjoy your dinner.
Absolutely. That's why I'm gonna.
All right, Leo.
Regards to you guys. God bless you. And as an American now, joining this great American family, the Truthstream has definitely, I think, a future. So keep on doing what you're doing. Take care, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leo. All right. Take care, everybody. All right. Well, anything else before we roll the outro?
No, I mean, certainly I've got a million thoughts in my head, but why don't we just go ahead and roll the outro? That was there was a lot of information to absorb, and I don't want to overwhelm anybody.
Well, and I'm not usually one to open up my coat and show off my shirt, but there it is. It's happening, everybody. All right, we're gonna go ahead and roll the outro.
Time to break out the longboards. And, ride a little bit of downhill.
It's time. All right,
everybody.
Ciao.
Thanks
for now.
so much.
Follow us on it's our link tree, and then we have all of our Twitter, X. Well, now it's X.
TikTok now too.
TikTok, especially TikTok number 2.
Yeah.
And our Telegram. All right, here we go.
Thanks, everybody.